The night of the omen. The village of Berema was known for its peace and order, nestled between rolling green hills and the great Serpent River. It was a place where traditions were sacred, where the elders spoke of spirits that guided fate, and where any sign of the unnatural was met with fear and suspicion. On the night of the great storm, Naima, a kind and gentle woman, went into labor. As she lay in her hut, gripping the woven mats beneath her, lightning split the sky, illuminating the faces of the village midwives who surrounded her. Outside, the villagers gathered under the baobab tree, whispering anxiously. But their whispers turned to gasps of terror when a colossal serpent, its scales gleaming under the rain, slithered silently through the village. It did not strike. It did not attack. Instead, it glided through the village square, as if drawn to something unseen, before disappearing into the Serpent River, a body of water believed to be the resting place of ancient spirits. As the final cry of a newborn pierced the storm, the villagers knew. The serpent came for him, the elders muttered. This child is not of the ordinary world. A father's fear. Naima gazed at her newborn son, her heart filled with both joy and uncertainty. He was beautiful, his skin warm brown like hers, his fingers small and delicate. But when his eyes blinked open, she noticed something strange. His irises were golden, unlike any she had ever seen. They shimmered in the lamplight, reflecting something unnatural, something otherworldly. Her husband, Kwame, stood at the doorway, his face pale. "What have you given birth to?" he whispered. Naima clutched the baby tighter. "He is our son, Kwame. He is just a child." But Kwame's hands trembled. He had heard the stories, legends of children touched by the spirit world, born under omens, destined to bring either great fortune or great destruction. And he did not want to find out which one his son would be. The cursed child. Ose grew like any other child, yet there was always something different about him. His skin was often cold, no matter how warm the day. Birds refused to land near him. Dogs cowered when he walked past. Even the river, where the children splashed and played, seemed to pull away from him, its current twisting unnaturally when he neared. The villagers noticed. They whispered. "That is the boy the serpent visited. Did you see his eyes? They glow like a beast. Spirits do not give gifts without a price." Kwame, burdened by fear, began to avoid his son. He rarely spoke to him, rarely touched him. When Ose looked at him, seeking love and comfort, he found only distance. His mother, Naima, however, never turned away. "You are special, my son," she whispered, stroking his hair at night. "Never let their words make you believe otherwise." But even as she spoke those words, she too wondered, was he truly just a boy, or something more? The night of betrayal. By the time Ose was 12, he had learned to live in loneliness. Children avoided him. Adults feared him. He often wandered the outskirts of the village, sitting alone by the riverbank, watching the water ripple. Sometimes, when he stared long enough, he thought he saw shadows moving beneath the surface, twisting and shifting, watching him back. Then, one fateful night, his father made a decision. "The spirits have cursed him," Kwame told the elders. "He is not my son. He is not a child of this world. I must rid my family of this curse before it is too late." Naima begged him to stop, pleaded with him not to listen to fear, but her words fell on deaf ears. Before dawn, Kwame shook Ose awake. "Come," he said, his voice strangely soft. Still groggy from sleep, Ose followed. They walked deep into the forest, past the familiar trees, past the trails he knew, past everything that led back home. "Father! Father!" Until there was nothing but darkness. Ose's breath quickened. "Baba, where are we going?" Kwame stopped walking. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, "Forgive me," his father whispered. And he turned away, leaving him behind. Alone in the wilderness. Ose ran after him, his bare feet pounding against the earth. "Baba, no," he cried. "Don't leave me." But his father never looked back. Ose watched, helpless, as his father's figure disappeared into the shadows, swallowed by the trees. Then, he was alone. The forest whispered. The wind howled. Somewhere in the distance, something moved. And for the first time in his life, Ose felt the pull of the darkness within him. This was only the beginning. The hidden truth of Ose's birth. Alone in the wilderness. Ose ran until his legs ached, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The dense forest loomed around him, unfamiliar and unforgiving. Shadows twisted between the trees, and the sounds of the night, distant growls, the rustling of unseen creatures, sent shivers down his spine. His father had abandoned him. The thought settled deep in his chest, a sharp, hollow ache that refused to fade. "Why?" he whispered to himself, his voice swallowed by the vastness of the wilderness. Cold and hungry, he stumbled upon a small clearing near a stream, its waters glimmering under the moonlight. He dropped to his knees, cupping handfuls of water, drinking desperately. Then, as the wind shifted, he felt it. A presence. The hairs on his arms stood on end. He wasn't alone. The mysterious shrine. Ose turned, his heart hammering, and that's when he saw it. Half hidden by ancient vines stood a shrine, carved into the stone of a massive tree. The entrance was framed by serpentine engravings, their eyes set with small, glowing stones that pulsed faintly in the darkness. A cold shudder ran down his spine. Every child in Berima had been warned about places like this. The elders spoke of shrines belonging to forgotten spirits, places where men entered but never returned. But Ose had nowhere else to go. Taking a shaky breath, he stepped inside. The elder in the shadows. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and aged wood. Small candles flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows across the stone carvings. And at the center of it all sat a figure. An old man, cross-legged before a shallow pool of water. His skin was dark and weathered, lined with age and wisdom. A long white beard rested against his chest, and his piercing silver eyes glowed in the dim light. Without looking up, he spoke. "You have finally come." Ose froze. Who are you?" he stammered. The old man smiled, his lips curling as if he had been expecting this moment for a long time. "I am Zubri. And you, Ose, are not an ordinary boy." Ose took a step back. "How do you know my name?" The elder chuckled softly. "I have known of you since before you took your first breath." A chill ran down Ose's spine. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zubri finally met his gaze, his silver eyes sharp and unyielding. "Because your birth was not an accident. You are part human and part spirit." The truth about his birth. Ose's stomach twisted. "No. That's not true. My mother was chosen by something greater than men." Zubri's voice was calm but firm. "The serpent that slithered through your village on the night of your birth was no ordinary creature. It was a deity, an ancient force bound to the Serpent River. And you are its child." Ose shook his head, his body trembling. "No. That's not possible. I have no powers. I'm just a boy." Zuburi raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" He reached for the pool of water beside him, and with one fluid motion, he stirred it with his hand. The water rippled, and suddenly, an image appeared on its surface. Ose saw himself. But it was not just him. Behind his reflection, coiling and shifting, was the outline of a massive serpent, its golden eyes identical to his own. His breath caught in his throat. "You were born between two worlds, Ose," Zubri continued. You carry the blood of men, but your soul is bound to the ancient spirits of the river. That is why the animals fear you. That is why the river calls to you. That is why your father abandoned you. Ose staggered backward, his mind spinning. No. No, I don't believe you. Zubri's expression softened. You do not have to believe me. But one day, your true nature will awaken, and when it does, you must choose your fate. The words hung in the air like a warning. Ose's chest tightened. His father had called him cursed. His village had feared him. But now this man, this stranger, was telling him he was something else entirely. Part human. Part spirit. A child of the serpent deity. And deep down, despite the fear crawling through his veins, he knew. It was true. A new beginning. Ose did not leave the shrine that night. Or the next. Days turned into weeks, and he stayed with Zubri, learning about the world beyond men. The elder taught him to listen to the whispers of the water, to sense the unseen forces around him, to understand the power that lay dormant within his blood. Control your emotions, Zubri told him. Power is neither good nor evil, it is what you make of it. Ose trained, though his heart remained heavy. He could not shake the memory of his father's fearful eyes, the way his village had turned against him. He was still lost, still searching for who he was meant to be. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the world fell silent, he could hear it. The call of the serpent. It was waiting for him, the village's greatest fear. The return of the cursed child. The village of Berima had long forgotten the name Ose. To them, he was a ghost, a boy swallowed by the forest, taken by spirits, lost to the land of men. But one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a figure emerged from the trees. Tall and strong, his skin bronzed from the sun, his golden brown eyes sharper than before, Ose had returned. He walked through the village as if he had never left, his long dreadlocks swaying with every step. His body, once thin and frail, was now lean with muscle, his stance filled with quiet confidence. But his arrival was met with fear. The moment the first villager recognized him, whispers spread like wildfire. It's him. The cursed boy has come back. He should not be here. Mothers pulled their children inside. Warriors reached for their spears. Even the village elders, once wise and measured, stared at him with unease. Ose saw their fear, but he did not shrink beneath it. Let them whisper, he thought. He had not returned for them. He had returned for answers. A light in the darkness. Not everyone feared him. There was one. Adia. She had never forgotten him. Unlike the others, she did not run when she saw him. Instead, she stepped forward, her dark eyes filled with curiosity, not fear. Ose, she whispered. He turned. And for the first time since entering the village, he felt warmth. Adia had been a child when he left, but now she was a young woman, her long black hair braided with golden beads, her presence as calming as the river at dawn. You remember me? He asked. Adia smiled. How could I forget? Her voice, unlike the others, held no fear. No suspicion. Only kindness. She was the only one. The only one who did not call him a curse. Whispers of fear, whispers of hope. Over the next few weeks, Ose stayed on the outskirts of the village, far from the wary eyes of the people. But Adia came to him, bringing food, conversation, and the one thing he had long forgotten, friendship. You are not cursed, Ose, she told him one evening, as they sat beneath the old baobab tree. He let out a bitter chuckle. The others don't see it that way. They don't see at all, Adia said, her eyes burning with quiet defiance. Fear makes men blind. But I see you. And I do not fear you. Her words stirred something in him. For so long, he had been alone. But now, For the first time in years, he felt seen. Adia believed in him. And in her presence, he began to believe in himself. The village chief's verdict. But the village was not blind to their growing closeness. They whispered, louder than before. She walks with the cursed one. She has been bewitched. He must be stopped before it's too late. The village chief, Jibari, a man whose power was built on tradition and fear, had enough. He gathered the elders and warriors and called for an assembly. As Ose and Adia walked through the village square, a wall of warriors blocked their path. Ose of Berema, the chief's voice rang out. You do not belong here. Your presence brings unease to our people. You must leave, and never return. Ose clenched his fist. I have done nothing. You exist, Jabari said coldly. And that is enough? Defiance and betrayal. Adia stepped forward, unafraid. You cast him out as a child, and now you cast him out again, she challenged. He has harmed no one. You fear what you do not understand. You do not understand, child, the chief hissed. The spirits mark some for greatness and others for destruction. We will not wait to see which one he becomes. The warriors raised their spears. Ose's rage burned. They had already taken his past. Now, they wanted his future. Adia turned to him, her hand grasping his. Come with me, she whispered. Where? Away from here. Away from their fear. Let's start a new life. Together. Ose's heart pounded. Escape. Freedom. For the first time, he had a choice. He looked at her. He saw hope in her eyes. And he nodded. The awakening. But fate was not done with him yet. As they turned to leave, a warrior stepped forward, blocking their path. We will not let you go so easily, he growled. Ose felt a pull deep in his chest, a sudden rush of power he had never known before. The air around him shifted. His breath grew cold. And then, the warrior lunged. Ose raised his arm to defend himself. And in that instant, something inside him awakened. A sharp, searing pain tore through his spine, a sensation unlike anything he had felt before. His skin rippled. His vision blurred. And as he gasped in shock, he felt something move beneath his flesh, something not human. The ground trembled. The villagers gasped in horror. And when Ose looked down, he saw scales. Dark and glistening, curling along his arms, his chest, his body shifting. No. But it was too late. The serpent within him had awakened. And the village's greatest fear had just become real. The transformation. The breaking point. Ose's body convulsed. Pain rippled through his limbs like fire, his bones shifting, twisting into something unnatural. He clutched his chest, his breath shallow, his vision blurring. The villagers stared in horror. What is happening to him? One elder whispered. He is cursed, another cried. The chief took a step back, his voice trembling with fear. We should have killed him when we had the chance. Adia rushed to Ose's side, her eyes wide with concern. Ose. What's happening? But Ose could not answer. His skin rippled like water, dark patches spreading across his arms, his chest. His fingers curled, nails sharpening into small black claws. Then, a deep, inhuman growl tore from his throat. Ose collapsed to the ground, his hands sinking into the dirt, his entire body contorting. He tried to scream, but what came out was a hiss. The birth of the serpent. Then it happened. His spine elongated. His ribs snapped and reformed. His legs fused together, dissolving into something long, sleek, and powerful. The crowd gasped in horror as Ose's human form melted away. And in his place, a massive serpent rose from the dust. His scales were black and gold, glistening in the sunlight. His body stretched longer than 3 men, thick and powerful. His eyes, still his own, still golden brown, stared at the terrified villagers. But the worst part was the silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, a single word shattered the stillness. Demon. And chaos erupted. Terror and betrayal. The warriors dropped their spears and ran. Women screamed, clutching their children. The village erupted into panic, people shoving past each other, desperate to escape. Even the elders, those who had once spoken in wisdom, were now nothing but frightened men, their voices rising in terror. Kill it, someone cried. Burn it. He was never one of us. Ose coiled his massive body, his heart hammering in his chest. He had always been an outcast. But now, they did not just fear him. They wanted him dead. Adia's choice. Only one person did not run. Adia. She stood before him, her hands trembling, but she did not move. She did not scream. She did not call him a demon. Instead, she looked at him the way she always had, with kindness. Ose, she whispered. He stared at her, his massive body still trembling from the transformation. In her eyes, he saw no fear. Only sorrow. You're still you, she said softly. Ose felt his heart clench. Was he? The crowd demanded his death. His body was no longer his own. He had become the very thing they feared. And now, he had a choice. The choice of the serpent. Rage burned within him. He could feel the power coiling inside him, stronger than he had ever imagined. One strike, one movement, and he could end them all. They had abandoned him. They had cast him out. Now they begged for their lives. But as he watched them, as he saw their terror, he realized something. They were not afraid of him. They were afraid of what he represented, a world beyond their understanding. A force beyond their control. He had been given power beyond any man, but was he willing to become the monster they feared? Was this who he was meant to be? Ose turned to Adia one last time. I am sorry, he whispered. And then, he turned and fled. Into the deep forest. The village watched in shock as the massive serpent slithered away, disappearing into the depths of the forest. Adia took a step forward. Ose. But he was gone. The warriors hesitated, gripping their spears. Should we follow him? One asked. The chief shook his head. No, he said, his voice shaking. He is not ours to follow. He belongs to the spirits now. And so, just as he had been cast out as a boy, Ose was once again alone. But this time, he was not the same. This time, he was something more. The journey to acceptance. The struggle within. The forest stretched endlessly before Ose, its towering trees whispering secrets in the wind. The golden light of the setting sun cast long shadows on his serpentine form as he slithered through the undergrowth. He had fled from the village, from their fear, from their hatred, but he could not flee from himself. His body was no longer his own. Each movement felt unnatural, yet instinctive. His muscles rippled beneath sleek black and gold scales, his senses sharper than ever before. He could hear the smallest rustle, smell the fear of prey nearby, taste the moisture in the air. But his mind, his soul, was still human. What am I? Ose whispered, his voice a low hiss. The forest did not answer. He was alone. The voice in the darkness. That night, he coiled beneath a massive baobab tree, exhaustion weighing heavy on his body. Then, the wind shifted. A presence filled the clearing. You call yourself lost, but I have waited for you. Ose's golden eyes snapped open. Before him stood a figure, a woman draped in shimmering white robes, her hair like woven silver, her eyes deep as the river. She seemed to glow softly, as if she was not entirely part of this world. "Who are you?" Ose asked, his voice thick with suspicion. "I am Esi," the woman said, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "I have watched over your kind for centuries. You are not the first to be caught between two worlds, Ose, and you will not be the last." Ose's heart pounded. "My kind." Esi nodded, stepping closer. "You were never meant to be only human. You were never meant to be only serpent. You are the child of both. And until you accept this truth, you will remain trapped." Ose's coils tightened. "You mean I can never be human again?" Esi's eyes softened. "You can. But only if you embrace both halves of yourself, your mortal heart and your divine blood." The trial of acceptance. Ose's mind raced. "And how do I do that?" Esi gestured toward the sky. "The gods do not grant power freely, Ose. They demand proof. To reclaim your human form, you must perform an act of pure love and sacrifice." Ose stared at her, disbelief washing over him. "What does that mean?" "Only you can discover that," Esi said. "But know this, your heart will lead you. And time is running out." The wind howled, swirling dust through the air. When Ose blinked, Esi was gone. Only the echoes of her words remained. The journey home. Ose had a choice. He could remain in the forest, accept his exile, live as the beast they feared. Or he could return to the village, to Adia, to the life that had been stolen from him. The decision was clear. For the first time since his transformation, Ose turned toward the path that led home. Fear breeds war. But as Ose made his way back, the village of Barima was preparing for battle. "He will return," the chief warned, his face tight with fear. "And when he does, we will not be defenseless." The warriors sharpened their spears, gathered fire, and whispered among themselves. "He is no longer one of us. He will destroy everything. We must strike first." Adia heard their words. And her heart ached. She alone still believed in him. She alone waited for him. She alone knew the truth, Ose was not a monster. But could she convince them before it was too late? Love breaks the curse. The return of the serpent. The village of Barima stood under a sky heavy with storm clouds, the scent of burning torches thick in the air. Warriors lined the perimeter, gripping spears, their faces hardened with fear. Women clutched their children, whispering prayers to the spirits. They had seen the cursed one disappear into the forest. And now, they felt it. He was coming back. A low rumble echoed through the earth as a massive figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. Ose had returned. His long serpentine body moved with silent grace, his black and gold scales shimmering under the dying light. His golden eyes scanned the village, not with rage, not with hatred, but with longing. He was home. But they did not see him as a son of Barima. They saw a beast. The chief raised his hand. "Steady." The warriors tightened their grips on their spears. They were ready to strike. Adia stand. But before the first spear could fly, a figure stepped forward. "Adia." Her voice rang through the tense air. "Stop." The warriors hesitated. The chief turned to her, anger in his eyes. "Adia, get back. It will strike." But she did not move. Instead, she stepped between Ose and the warriors, her small frame a barrier between the man she loved and the people who feared him. She turned to face them, her voice strong and unshaken. "This is not a monster. This is Ose. The same boy who grew up among you, the same boy you cast out. He is one of us." The villagers murmured, some with doubt, others with unease. The chief's expression hardened. He is cursed, Adia. He is not like us anymore. Adia shook her head. No. He is exactly like us. You fear him because you do not understand him. But fear does not make him a demon. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not break. She turned back to Ose, her eyes searching his. Ose, show them. Show them you are not their enemy. The choice. Ose stared at her, his golden eyes filled with pain. He had been cast out. He had been haunted. Now, he had the power to destroy them all. But as he looked at Adia, as he saw the love in her eyes, he knew. He did not want revenge. He did not want bloodshed. He just wanted to belong. Slowly, Ose lowered his head to the ground, his massive coils relaxing. The warriors hesitated. The villagers watched in silence. The beast did not strike. The demon did not attack. Instead, the serpent bowed. A sign of peace. A sign that he had never been their enemy. And the spirits took notice. The breaking of the curse. The wind shifted, carrying whispers from a world unseen. The sky darkened, the air thick with something ancient and powerful. The villagers gasped as a strange mist swirled around Ose, wrapping around his body in shimmering tendrils of gold. The earth shook beneath them. Then, a bright burst of light erupted from Ose's form, blinding all who looked upon him. Adia shielded her eyes, her heart pounding. The villagers cried out in shock as the great serpent began to change. The long coils of his body shrunk. The gleaming scales faded into dark skin. His massive fangs receded, his limbs returned, his human form restored. When the light finally dimmed, Ose collapsed to the earth, his breathing ragged. He was no longer a serpent. He was human again. The village is awakening. The silence that followed was deafening. Ose lay on the ground, his body weak, his heart hammering. He reached for his own hands, his fingers trembling, his chest rising and falling in disbelief. He was himself again. The villagers stared, their fear slowly unraveling into something else. Wonder. The chief, his spear still gripped tightly in his hand, took a cautious step forward. This is impossible, he murmured. Adia knelt beside Ose, tears in her eyes. It is not impossible, she whispered. It is a gift. A blessing, not a curse. And the village knew she was right. For if Ose had truly been a demon, he would have destroyed them. If he had truly been a curse, he would not have returned in peace. And if he had truly been a monster, then love would not have been able to bring him back. Acceptance and legacy. That night, for the first time in years, Ose slept in his own village. He was no longer the cursed one. No longer a child of fear and exile. He was one of them. And though the scars of the past could not be erased, the people of Barima embraced him as their own. For years, they would tell the tale of the serpent who became a man again. Of the boy cast out who returned, not with vengeance, but with love. Of the woman who saw the truth when no one else could. And of the lesson they had all learned. That fear can only be conquered by acceptance. That love is the greatest power of all. The end.